I got my kids ready for school, and my husband hurried out the door. The usual sounds of daily life filled the atmosphere. From the outside, my life appeared idyllic, a loving family, a stable home, and an orderly routine. However, beneath this facade, I felt an unidentifiable and growing sense of emptiness. My husband, despite being a good man, had become emotionally distant over the years. Our conversations had turned mechanical, and our bond was strained under the pressures of daily responsibilities. At first, I noticed his change subtly. His attention had shifted toward work and the demands of daily obligations. I understood that life was busy and responsibilities were relentless. Still, there were times when I felt unseen, longing for a sense of my former self before life became so regimented. Then there was the garbage man. I didn't know his name, but we exchanged polite smiles each week as he did his rounds. He was an unremarkable figure, always clad in the same reflective vest and oversized gloves. What stood out, however, was his demeanor, a quiet kindness and humility that I hadn't experienced in a long time. I began to observe small gestures, like how he carefully handled the bins and waved at my kids on their way to school. These seemingly minor actions felt meaningful. One rainy morning, as I struggled to drag the heavy bin to the curb, he unexpectedly appeared and offered to help. "Let me get that for you," he said in a soothing voice. Feeling awkward, I thanked him, unaccustomed to such kindness. We exchanged a few words, nothing profound, but I found comfort in how he listened. For the first time in ages, I felt acknowledged, even if just momentarily. That brief moment lingered in my mind all day. It wasn't the act itself that moved me, but the genuine warmth behind it. I realized how much I had been yearning for connection, even with a stranger. One day, while taking out the trash, I spotted the garbage man struggling with an overturned bin at the end of the driveway. Without thinking, I called out, "Would you like a cup of water or something?" He looked up in surprise, then smiled and nodded. An unusual blend of nervousness and excitement filled me as I rushed inside to get a drink. When I handed him the glass, he expressed his gratitude and paused to take a sip before saying, "You didn't have to do this. Most people don't even notice us." His remark struck me unexpectedly. I replied, "Sometimes it's nice to feel noticed." Before I knew it, I suggested, "Would you like to come in for a minute? It's hot out here." To my surprise, he accepted, albeit hesitantly. Inside, he wiped his hands on his vest before we settled at the kitchen table, where an unfamiliar, unspoken tension filled the air, not uncomfortable, just palpable. He began to share stories about his job, explaining how often it went unappreciated. "People don't see us unless something goes wrong," he said with a rueful smile. His humility resonated with me. I found myself sharing things I hadn't confided in years, details about my family, my kids, my husband, and the lingering loneliness I struggled with. He listened intently, his expression thoughtful and non-judgmental. His genuine care surprised me. Eventually, he checked the time and said he needed to return to work. As he stood to leave, he noticed a framed family photo on the shelf and commented softly, "You have a beautiful family. You're lucky." His words seemed to reflect my life back at me, leaving me unsure whether to see it as a blessing or a reminder of what I felt was missing. As he walked away, I stood at the door, contemplating the moment. Though seemingly insignificant, it resonated deeply with me. I realized how much I yearned for someone to see me, if only for an instant, and to remind me of the parts of myself I thought I had lost. As time went by, I began to think about the garbage man more frequently than I intended. His kindness had made an impact on me, Although I wasn't in love or even infatuated with him, there was a quality about him that made me feel acknowledged in a way I hadn't experienced in years. That small bond felt like a lifeline I hadn't realized I needed. Our interactions increased, remaining innocent. Yet I noticed he lingered longer during his visits while I loitered by the door, making casual conversation about the weather or the kids. I reassured myself it was all harmless, a brief escape from the daily grind. However, deep down, I understood it was something more. One evening, while sitting with my husband after dinner, he seemed unusually silent. I inquired if something was bothering him, and after a long pause, he asked, "Have you been talking to the garbage guy a lot?" His tone wasn't accusatory, but it carried an undertone of something I couldn't define, perhaps hurt or confusion. I froze, my mind racing for a reply. "We've had a few talks," I confessed, attempting to keep my voice steady. "He's just friendly." My husband looked deeply into my eyes in a way he hadn't in ages. "It's more than that, isn't it?" he asked softly, feeling my chest tighten. I tried to deny it, but the words failed me. Instead, I replied, "I feel invisible to you. For years. He just listens. That's all." My voice wavered, and I could feel tears rising. His expression softened, but pain remained in his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me you felt this way?" he asked. I lacked a satisfying answer. I had convinced myself he wouldn't care. Or was too busy. But hearing his question made me realize how much I had assumed without giving him a chance. The conversation was raw and emotional, unlike any we'd had in years. For the first time, I revealed how lonely I had felt and how much I missed the connection we once shared. In that moment, I understood that the garbage man wasn't the solution. Rather, he was a reflection of the issues in my marriage that I had feared to confront. When I met the garbage man the next morning, I shared what I had discussed with my husband. He listened intently and then said, "You don't need me. You need to repair what you already have. That's where your heart lies." His simple words cut through my confusion. As he walked away, I felt a mix of gratitude and guilt, knowing I had to close this chapter for my marriage to heal. The morning after my talk with the garbage man, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at an empty coffee cup. My husband entered, and for the first time in ages, he paused to truly see me. "Can we talk?" he asked, his tone gentler than usual. We sat down together without distractions, no phones, no TV, no rushing. I took a deep breath and spoke openly, sharing how loneliness had infiltrated our marriage and how we had become like strangers. To my surprise, he listened attentively, his expression displaying regret and understanding. When I finished, he reached for my hand. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice trembling. I didn't realize how much I had withdrawn. I thought I was doing what was necessary for us, but I see now that I neglected the most important aspect, us. His words struck me deeply, and for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. From that moment on, we both committed to rebuilding our lost connection. It wasn't easy. There were still moments when old patterns threatened to resurface, but we continued to revisit the promise we had made to truly see one another. One afternoon, while preparing dinner together, my husband expressed, "I never thanked you for your honesty. It hurt, but I needed to hear it." His vulnerability reminded me of why I had fallen in love with him in the first place. The next time the garbage man came, I stepped outside to thank him, sharing how his insights had helped clarify what I needed to focus on. He smiled knowingly and said, "Sometimes we need a little nudge in the right direction." As he drove away, I felt a sense of closure, not only with him, but with the part of myself that had sought something outside my marriage. The connection I sought wasn't something someone else could provide. It was something I needed to rediscover within myself and with my husband. In the weeks that followed, I found myself smiling and laughing more, cherishing the small moments with my family that I once overlooked. The emptiness that had felt overwhelming began to subside, replaced by a deeper appreciation and love. Reflecting back, I realized that the garbage man's presence in my life wasn't about temptation or betrayal. It was about gaining a new perspective. He reminded me of the beauty of being recognized, the value of listening, and the importance of nurturing the relationships that truly matter. Ultimately, it was a tale of rediscovery, choosing love, and finding my way back to the life I already had,